Hello all and welcome to Living Conversations, hosted by Living Bankside with me, Keanna Gordon, and
Sahra, Issa.
today we are here with Sir Simon Hughes and we are in LSBU for a change of location. LSBU was founded in 1892 as Southwark's only university. It has lectured generations of people from art to architecture to politics and much more. Today we are here to sort of dive into what you do and sort of your role. And Sahra?
We should also note that Living Bankside is a non-partisan organisation, independent, and does not align with any political party. So, you were first elected for the MP for Bermondsey in 1983.
Long before you were born.
Yes. And then becoming Deputy Leader in Liberal Democrats in 2010, then Minister of Justice during the coalition government. He now advises for Talgo, a Spanish train manufacturer, acts as a Chancellor here at LSBU, and last week celebrated his 75th birthday. So happy belated birthday.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
you. It's a bit worrying, isn't it? I try not to pretend it's really as old as that, but I sort of can't escape it.
Yes. So as we've mentioned, you've lived in Borough now for over 50 years, 7 as an MP, but now in a number of patron roles across local institutions. In that time, what keeps you in the borough and what do you think has changed in your time here?
Good, lots of issues there. Thank you. I came actually 49 years ago this year, so I came in 1977.
Wow.
So next year will be 50 years. That's a very long time. And even though I'm now very old, it's 2/3 of my life I've been here. And I moved first to just near the Old Kent Road, just on the Camberwell side of the Old Kent Road. And I came here because I was looking for accommodation when I was training to be a young lawyer. Young lawyers in the end got no pay at the beginning, so I needed somewhere that was either free or very cheap. And a friend of mine from university had been appointed the warden of something called the Greenhouse Trust, which was a Christian youth organisation based in Coburg Road. And they were looking for people who would, in their spare time, come and help with the youth organisation. So together with 2 other friends, we were able to move into a lovely flat in Coburg Road, overlooking what's now Burgess Park, which in those days was existed, but was a much smaller park than it is now. And I stayed there, working as a lawyer in the daytime, working in the youth club in the evening and weekends, volunteering, getting more involved in local community issues, was pressurised into working with others to found the Burgess Park Residents Association. So set that up because there was a need for people to challenge the authorities over the issues, and continued to be involved in lots of things. And when I was there, I was asked to become more involved in politics locally. I had been a Liberal since I was a teenager. I had been a party member since I was at university, but I actually became involved for the first time and involved in standing for political office for the first time in 1981 when I stood for what was then called the Greater London Council, which came before the Greater London Assembly. So that was a short period. And then in 1983, 2 significant things happened. They were not related except in time. I moved from SE5 to SE1, from one side of the Old Kent Road to the other, both very near the Old Kent Road, so I could hear the Old Kent Road from my previous flat and hear the Old Kent Road from where I am now. And then in February '83, yes, I was elected for the first time for what was then called Southwark Bermondsey constituency. And I had the privilege to be elected, I think, another 7 times for that constituency.
Congrats.
Until eventually, in 2015, having had 5 years in the coalition between Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, which I never expected and hadn't planned for, I lost my seat. I'd won it from Labour in '83. I lost it back to Labour in 2015 because people were not happy, I guess, at having somebody who'd supported the Conservatives in government. I understand that because there'd been no Conservatives elected in the north of the borough since 1931, and no Conservatives anywhere in the borough still for many years, and there haven't been any local Conservatives elected as councillors for many years now. So it was in politics, you win some battles. I won when the Labour Party were very divided and when the Tories were not well, in some ways we're not popular. I lost when we had been in government and paid the price for that. But obviously 10 years on, things are very different, and who knows what might happen at the next election. I'm not planning to stand at the next election.
So as well as you've been a long-standing local politician, you also support Millwall FC, right? Who tragically lost out on a chance to play in the championship final after their best season in decades. So do you think the club ought to pursue legal action over Southampton?
Well, really interesting. They would be playing this afternoon. We wouldn't be doing this had Millwall won their playoff against Hull.
Yeah.
We would not be here because I would have been at Wembley, where I've been with Millwall often, actually, over the years, normally unsuccessfully, sadly. And sadly, we lost the semi-final playoff to Hull, who are in the final. And controversially, the other team is Middlesbrough, who, as you and the people who watch may remember or realise, in the end were told that they had an automatic place in the playoff final because Southampton had been found guilty of spying on their training.
Yeah.
So the answer is Millwall did brilliantly. They came third this season. Had they got 2 more points, they would have had automatic promotion to the Premiership, which would have been extraordinary. Mm-hmm. It's the nearest they have come, apart from being in playoffs. They've only once before, for a couple of years in the 80s, been in the top league of English football. That was before the Premiership was invented. It was when I was here, but it was what was called the First Division. And they got up to 10th in the First Division. So that's the best they've ever been. I think they're in a good place. I'm a big sports fan, not just football, but I'm a big sports fan generally. And I think they've got a good manager, a good squad. They've got an excellent chief executive. And although it's been frustrating, they've got a really good fan base. Their ground is now fit for purpose. They've got an agreement with Lewisham Council, which means they can develop around the ground. So they're ready to go into the Premiership. And I would think it is highly possible that in the next year or so, they may be able to go into the Premiership, which will be very exciting for all the many, many, many hundreds of Millwall fans who aren't just people who live locally. People come from all over the world to support Millwall, which you discover. So it's great that they're here. Last night I went to watch Surrey play cricket at the Oval. I'm a big cricket fan. I'm actually a Glamorgan supporter, which Glamorgan's the Welsh team, and I'm Welsh by heritage. But Surrey were playing in a game which they won against Yorkshire, so we've got great cricket on our doorstep. If somebody was kind enough to pay for my tickets, I'd go to Wimbledon because I'm a big tennis fan, and that's coming up, but I haven't got any tickets and they're very expensive, so I probably won't go. I have been in the past, and other sports as well. So yes, Millwall, I think they're on the right track. I think they have good leadership, and I would hope and expect that we can see them promoted. Well, certainly doing very well in the Championship next year, and I hope promoted in the next couple of years. I
hope so. Going a little deeper into your time in politics, you moved into the borough in 1977 and then ran to become an MP. So what motivated you to get into politics at the time?
Well, it goes back a bit, really. When I was a teenager living in South Wales, I lived in an area which was a strong Labour area, traditionally. There was a general election before I was old enough to vote. I wrote away for the manifestos of the parties. I read their policies, Labour, Conservative, Liberal and Welsh Nationalist. And I decided that the Liberal policy was what I agreed with, and therefore I must be a Liberal because my views and theirs. And the reasons we're an international party, we're an environmental party, we're a party that believes in social justice and greater economic equality. We're a party that believes in the human rights and individual liberties of the individual, and a party that believes in the mixed economy. Some things are better run publicly and some things are better run privately. And those principles have remained with me. The two things that actually led to me becoming politically active were my support for Palestine when I was a teenager. And we were in Herefordshire by then, and it wasn't a big issue locally, but I was very clear that Palestinian people should have the right to their own country and their own freedom, and also my right for majority government in South Africa, because in those days South Africa was run by the white minority of the population. And I spent a lot of my life fighting against apartheid, both in this country, and I worked in Africa and campaigned with people in South Africa across party and in a little tiny way helped, I hope, to move things forward until there was the first ever democratic election when Mandela was elected as the president. And in relation to Palestine, obviously now Palestine has been recognised. I mean, it's had a terrible recent history because of what's happened in Gaza and what happens all the time in the West Bank. I believe Israel should exist, but Palestine absolutely also has a right to exist too. And it's my prayer every day that there is peace in Jerusalem and peace in the Middle East and justice for people who've been dreadfully, dreadfully treated. So I guess international things as much as other things, but also I felt a strong calling. I have a Christian faith. I felt a strong calling when I left university to come to work in the inner city. I've been brought up in villages, originally on the English side of the Welsh border, and then on the Welsh side of the Welsh border, then back on the English side of the Welsh border. But always in little villages, never in cities. But I felt called to the inner city, and I guess I came here because it worked out providentially that this was where the opportunity arose, and I wanted to be here. And from the time I came, I did lots of youth work because I believe that supporting young people and helping them was one of the most useful things I could do. I'd done youth work at college. I'd done Cubs and Scouts when I was at school, and Duke of Edinburgh's Awards and all those sorts of things. So yes, I came to help the campaign for justice in the inner city, but coupled with an interest in justice internationally as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've mentioned quite some big topics, you know, a lot of worldly matters, you know, the macro and international, but you've lived in the borough for such a long time. Sort of what keeps you driven on a local level? What pushes you to want to be that person in your area that is speaking up on these matters and taking action?
Thank you. Yes, I guess it's partly the sort of inner motivation and a faith and a political belief. I came into a borough which felt as if the systems weren't working well. Mm-hmm. That doesn't say people in other parties weren't, some of them doing perfectly good things. I had friends and have friends in other parties. That's not the issue really. But the Greater London Council ran lots of the housing. They didn't run it very well. Southwark Council was the biggest local authority landlord in London, and often the housing was not managed well, and I saw people really struggling. And so once I joined the local Liberal Party here with other people, our campaign was on those things. The biggest first local campaign was on housing. That was the biggest issue back in the 80s when I knocked on people's doors, standing for my first election, which was in 1981. The biggest issue for people was we want better housing services. We want the management to be better. We want the maintenance to be better. We want the repairs to be better. And we want to be able to stay in a home that is suitable for our size and so on. Lots of families were overcrowded. They couldn't move. The allocation system wasn't working. So housing was absolutely the biggest issue. And I campaigned for from the summer of 80 until my first election, which was in February 83, so very nearly 3 years. I'd stood in 2 elections for the London Council and then for the Borough Council, and came runner-up. But in all those things, that was still the overriding issue. And there were other issues around, of course. Education is always an issue, health is always an issue, but housing was the drive. Now, I've been kept going by lots of wonderful, loyal family and friends who've supported me and worked with me. I would never have been able to hold my seat as an MP without a brilliant team of people. I'm in contact still with many of them. I had a birthday party last weekend referring to the birthday I had, and people like Rachel, who worked with me running my diary and things for the very first day I got elected, who'd been a friend, sister of a college friend of mine, who came to help with me. She came back. So there are lots of people. And then we built up numbers of local councillors. And from 83 until 2002, when we became the biggest party in Southwark, there were more and more people who stood and were councillors and part of the team, and my brilliant staff who helped. Increasingly, they were initially with housing issues, social services issues, benefits issues, finance issues, and then increasingly with immigration and asylum issues, because that became a growing agenda through the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. We certainly did more bits of work as an MP than I think on Home Office matters than any other constituency in the country, according to Home Office figures. And in terms of the casework, the individual items, certainly more than most members of Parliament. There were others who had similarly busy caseloads. So I was kept going by the people who worked with me. I was kept going by the community here. And I felt very strongly the sense of identity of this community. I love the community very much. I didn't have a pre-existing South East London connection till I moved. My two older half-brothers were born in New Malden. My dad was born in Twickenham. But that obviously was a bit further southwest and a bit further south. And so this place has sort of become mine, and it's become mine because I love the things about it. I love Shakespeare. This is where Shakespeare's Rose Theatre was. I studied Chaucer at school. This is where Chaucer's pilgrims started their journey from the Tabard Inn down the Old Kent Road. I love Dickens. This is where Dickens' father was put in prison. I love beautiful church buildings. I was a chorister in a cathedral when I was a little boy, and Southwark Cathedral is just beautiful. So the history is wonderful. The river is extraordinary and interesting. My granddad was a sailor, left school at 14 to sail across the Atlantic and earn his living. To live as I do, less than a mile from the Thames, being able to walk to the Thames, is extraordinary. If you go around the world, you say, people say, where do you live? I say, I live near Tower Bridge. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know where that is. And if I used to go and say to the children at Tower Bridge Primary School, you're some of the only children in the world who, when you talk about where you're at primary school, people will know where it is. If you go to Africa, if you go to the Caribbean, if you go to South Asia and you say, I was at Tower Bridge Primary School, I think they wouldn't even ask which city was that in. I think they'd know. So that's wonderfully exciting. That there's a huge historic loyalty to the old boroughs of Southwark. There were 3 boroughs from 1900 to 1965. There was the borough of Bermondsey, which was the old docks borough with a great docking tradition. There was the borough of Southwark, which came down here from the borough where Bankside is, and then there was the borough of Camberwell, and they were merged in 1965. They all have hugely strong traditions. They've had great history, and people claim that Southwark is London's most historic borough. I think other places may claim that too, but it is wonderfully historic and wonderfully dynamic. And the answer to your question, what's changed, is 4 things I think have changed. 1, when I first was elected, only 2 in 100 properties were owned by the people who live in them. It's now hugely more than that. When I was first elected, 4 out of every 5 properties, so 80%, were owned by Southwark Council. It's far fewer now. They still own in Southwark about 40-something thousand tenanted properties, and about 20 other thousand where people have bought under the right to buy. But so the housing has changed phenomenally. Much more owner occupation, much more private renting, many fewer council-owned tenancies, and much more social housing. So that's the first thing that's changed. Secondly, when I came here first, it was the end of the period when the docks had been along the river. And it was pretty derelict, to be honest, because the docks had closed in the 70s. There'd been a long conversation about what should happen. And under Mrs. Thatcher's government, there was something set up called the London Dockland Development Corporation to develop both sides of the river from London Bridge east. And that resulted in huge development on our side of the river, in Surrey Docks, all around the peninsula, and other side in Tower Hamlets and Newham and so on. So that's fundamentally changed. And all the wharves stopped being wharves by and large. They became luxury flats or offices and so on. The third thing is the demography, the makeup of the population changed. When I first moved here, the largest immigrant community in Southwark, I think, were the Irish, who were Roman Catholics, who'd been here for a long time. But obviously they weren't visibly different because they were white. But they had very strong and very controlling influence on the borough. Most of the politicians in the Labour Party had Irish Roman Catholic links, and they linked together. There was a relatively small Bangladeshi population just here on the Rockingham estate. there was a Caribbean population, mainly in Peckham and Camberwell. But over the period from 1980 to 2020, the most significant growth has been in the West African population, so Nigerian, Sierra Leonean, Ghanaian communities, and then Horn of Africa, so Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, the Horn of Africa, and the growth in the Latin American communities, Spanish and Portuguese speaking, Colombian, Ecuadorian, Brazilian, in particular, not only. So that's the second change. Thirdly, as a result of all those changes, it's become a much more dynamic place for business. Lots of big businesses have moved on the river, Price Waterhouse, banks, solicitors, Hayes Galleria, all that area. So that's become a major change. And fourthly, it's become a tourist destination in a way that it never was before. I mean, there were always tourists who came to look at Shakespeare, Dickens, Chaucer and other things, but not in the same way as they come now. So huge, huge, huge changes, but lots of challenges still. Lots of inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor is probably wider than it's ever been. There's some people with ridiculous amounts of wealth. Unacceptable in my view. I don't think anybody can ever justify having huge amounts of wealth. And there are lots of people who really struggle. We're not meeting the housing need. That's always difficult, but the developers are not generally helpful. They say they can't build enough affordable housing. And we still suffer as part of the country from a real lack of educational opportunity, which is why I've been involved with the university since I became its MP in '83. When I was asked to become an honorary fellow in the late '80s, I think. When I was asked in 2018 if I'd become the Chancellor, that's a huge privilege, but also something I really wanted to do because advancing educational opportunities, which is what the original Borough Polytechnic was set up to do, set up, as you rightly say, at the end of the previous century. It's about providing the skills for local women and men, and from the beginning it was women and men, not just men. It's really important. 1892, often there was no reference to women and men, to have the skills they needed. And that's why what we really prioritize here, engineering, a really big skill. Business school is really big and important. That's my watch when I will turn it off. It's a friend from Sierra Leone trying to phone me up. Not from Sierra Leone, he lives in Rotherhithe. Business school, really useful skill. Huge amount of people in our healthcare and nursing and allied healthcare services, and a huge school to do with architecture and the built environment. So those are our four main activities. We're fairly unique in the UK, and the majority of our students are from the global majority, which was not the case, obviously, 50 years ago. A lot from South Asia. We also have a lot of students who don't come to us at 18. They come later. They live at home, somewhere in London. They will have probably caring responsibilities. They'll have partners or children or parents or relatives that they look after. They may need to work to make ends meet. So they're trying to combine caring responsibilities and working and studying. And therefore the big challenge is to support them to make sure they come out at the other end and they don't let the academic stuff fall away. But we're very proud, and we have postgraduate students, we have research, we have links with universities in Egypt and Bahrain. But we're very proud of the fact that, for example, our students get if you look at when they leave and look at 5 years after they've left, they get the best salaries of any of the modern universities in London. And we're in the top 5 universities in the world in terms of diversity and support for equality and inclusion. And we do lots of other good things. So it's a really important university. We've just appointed a new Vice-Chancellor who's excellent, Paul Kett. There's deliberation as to who will take over from me as Chancellor. I've asked that it should be a female because we've had black and white chancellors, but we've never had female chancellors, and I think it'd be good. Slight majority of our students are women, so that would be good too. But it's not in my hands, so I don't have a final say on that. But yeah, so I've been a chair of governors of primary school. I've done youth work for many years. I've been on the trustee for a while and then council reference for the Salmon Youth Centre. I was chair of governors of Bacon's College in Rotherhithe for 4 years. I was trustee before that. So lots of interest in education because it's a way of making the difference. And it's even more challenging now in the days of phones and other things, because we need to make sure that children at home are in homes where people talk to them. They don't just put them in front of the television or the computer. So they don't have the parents or the carers just on the phone all the time. And you teach them to read and have the basic skills from the beginning. And lots of fresh air, and they're not staying inside. So education, I guess, is as big as challenge and interest for me now as ever. That links with employment so that people can be paid, and the housing issues have not gone away. International justice remains, and the worst injustice in our continent is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine often. I love it dearly. I have Ukrainian friends. I do what I can to support families in Ukraine. And it's just unacceptable that nowadays countries can just walk into other countries and say, you've got to be part of us, against the will of the people there.
I mean, definitely, there's a lot going on in the world currently that, isn't up to the local people. But I think from what you've said, we can see that you're quite the local patron. You take that active stance and you like to be that active member that's sort of pushing for things, for example, with education being so involved. I think it's quite interesting given your career path, because most who do similar professions such as yourself, they're not as interested in young people in education. And I think LSBU as a university is quite fitting for you as a character, because I think it aligns quite closely with your morals and sort of your understanding of priorities. In terms of your role as Chancellor, I know you're stepping down, you've had quite a good run.
I've had the maximum run. You're allowed to do 2 terms of 4 years if you're appointed for a second term. It's the same period as American presidents are allowed.
Yeah.
2 terms of 4 years. Mr. Trump has been trying to pretend that he might be allowed to have a 3rd term, but I think even he realises in his mind that that's not going to happen. So yes, I can't stay on even if I wanted to after November.
I mean, it goes to show you've clearly done something well that you were able to hold your position for so long. But as Chancellor, when you were running, sort of, young people, they don't really know much about Liberal Democrats. Most don't know much about politics at all. So sort of, how do you think that will influence in the coming years of, we've just had the local elections that have gone, a lot of young people voted for Greens. Sort of, how do you think that's going to shape future decisions? And why did you take your role knowing that young people who you seem to care a lot about don't adhere most to you?
Yeah, well, let's separate the two a bit, but your analysis is right. So the university job I took because of my commitment to education and the opportunities it gave. And I hope I've been able to contribute a lot, supporting students, working with the leadership team and so on. I made an agreement when I became the Chancellor that I wouldn't, during the time I was the Chancellor, be involved in active or public party politics. So I'm still allowed to be a party member, I'm still a Liberal Democrat member. I can go to party meetings and party conferences, but I have not, and you can check my Twitter feed or other things, I've not, since I became the Chancellor, said rude things about Labour or Conservatives or Greens or Reform or other, even though I have lots of views. Obviously, from November, I will be free again, if I wanted to say things about other political parties. For me, there is a real challenge, and I'll be honest with you is where I think we are. I think people voted Labour 2 years ago nationally because the Tories had got into such a muddle, and people just desperately wanted to change, and Labour were the most viable alternative. Interestingly, the turnout was poor, the percentage of people who voted Labour was poor. And under our strange electoral system, I won't bore your viewers with it, but you can actually do better on lower share of the vote. So they got a huge majority, even though their share of the public vote was very poor. Obviously, they made some bad mistakes at the beginning, and they lost confidence of the public. What's now happened is, it seems to me, there are battles for the left and the right of the old left and right of British politics. So the Conservatives would say they were on the right wing, they wanted to defend the status quo, defend private enterprise and support that. And Reform have come up, well, they've been building for 10 years because they were the same people who led the campaign to get us out of the European Union. As the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage was around then, went to school in South London. not a man from the working classes, a very affluent man with huge amounts of money, as many of the leaders of Reform are. And they played into the argument that I understand, which said that we don't make our own decisions anymore, we're part of the European Union, and therefore decisions are made for us. Actually, there was a fundamental flaw in that, because the decisions in the European Union were made jointly by everybody, and so things didn't happen unless we agreed to them. Very few decisions were made by majority decision, they were made unanimously. So it wasn't that we were being told what to do by the European Union, it's that we were helping decide what the policy should be for us and the European Union. So that was they won an argument which suggested the European Union were telling us what to do. There's also a European court, and we have a judge on it like all the other countries, and therefore there was a British judge. However, the argument that I think they won, in addition, was to say we're not in control of our own borders. Because when you're in the European Union, there is freedom of movement of people in the European Union. So all 28 countries, as it was then, all of us, if we're British, you could go there, and if you're German, you could come here, or if you're Finnish, you could come here. And therefore, there were lots of people coming from the European Union. They sort of tried to imply, in a racist way, that the immigration that was coming in, and the fault of the European Union was that we couldn't stop refugees and we couldn't stop people as asylum seekers from wherever they came, Horn of Africa, elsewhere. Of course, the European Union, freedom of movement wasn't for people from Africa or Asia or the Horn of Africa, unless they were already citizens within the EU. But they won the argument that somehow, if we left the EU, we could control our borders. And you can. Outside the EU, we can decide who comes across our border. There was then this bizarre period for sort of 10 years. Abdul, you can't speak to me now. The period after 2015 saw a huge growth in immigration, led by the Conservatives. Not from the EU, who were told they weren't welcome, but from other countries. Huge growth. Immigration went up to something like 400,000 net a year, mainly from India and other countries. And everybody realised that, therefore, the solution wasn't just coming out of the EU. And so Reform have had two opportunities. They had the first opportunity saying the EU were letting lots of people in. And then they had another 10 years when, bizarrely, under the Conservatives, lots of other people were coming. And they have made the case that we're a small set of islands and we don't have the capacity to look for people. And so Reform have grown hugely, and it really is all about an argument about stopping other people coming here and about making us British again. I mean, some of them say the most bizarre things. They say things like, we want to recover our tradition as a Christian country. Well, Christians have a great tradition of loving and respecting their neighbours, of tolerance and so on. Christians are not exclusivists for white Anglo-Saxon people who happen to be Christians in this country. Christianity began in Palestine with somebody who was Jewish. I mean, so they really misread the whole lot, but they've been very popular and they've been able to attract. So and lots of young people find this attractive because they have voted for Reform, sadly, because they think that it'll allow us to stand up for Britain. St George's flag. St George, of course, was born in Turkey, not in England, which people sometimes forget. On the other side, the Greens have grown very quickly in this country. They've been much more dominant. They've been in government in Germany and in other countries. And they have argued a more radical argument, which has been attractive. And their campaign was very successful. You know, their key phrase was, bring back hope, let's have hope. And the green issues, historically, ones I've supported sort of before the Green Party were around, for respect for our planet, all the stuff that David Attenborough talks about, hugely valuable. In a way, the Greens have said less about that recently in the campaign. They've said more about Gaza, about international peace and war, and about immigration things. And I think they may have, like Reform, they may just have discovered that they are reaching their peak of support because people may discover the other things they have been saying. For example, they believe in open borders. That's their policy. I think that would be madness. I think, given the history of the politics of recent years, suddenly to say we should have no controls on borders. I never argued for it when I was in Parliament, and I always argued we should keep passport controls for the UK. And they also argued that we shouldn't have NATO, or we shouldn't be part of NATO. NATO, the organisation which defends militarily the countries in Europe. I'm not a militarist, but I'm not a pacifist either. If my friends in Ukraine are being invaded by Russia, I think we have a duty to go to do something about them. If people in other parts of the world are being the victims of military oppression, I think sometimes we have a right to go and fight to defend them. So I think the Greens may discover that they lose some of that early popularity. At the moment, they are very popular, which leaves the challenge for Liberals as to how do we win the argument. And I think we haven't done that as well recently as we should have done. I think we've been too quiet. I think we haven't made some of the right policy statements that attract young people. I don't think we've been as attractive to young people as we ought to have been. And when I'm liberated from my restrictions in November, I may be able to say more about that. In the meantime, I've been working with colleagues behind the scenes, as I'm allowed to do, to support our colleagues here in Southwark and elsewhere. And as you well know, local elections produce an interesting outcome. For the first time, again, in your lifetime probably, the last time Labour won control of the borough when it was first formed in 1965. They then held control until we became the majority party in 2002. But we didn't have a majority. We were the largest party, more votes than any other party, but we ran the council for 4 years on our own as a minority. And then in 2006, Labour and us were the same, and the Conservatives said, if you want to carry on, you'll have to have an agreement with us. So there were 4 years when the dominant party was Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives were the junior partner. Labour just won power back in 2010, so they've run the council for 16 years, but they lost control this year. They're still the biggest party. The Greens are second. They overtook us, and we increased, sadly only by 1, but we increased our seats. So as we speak now, and obviously when this is shown, things may have moved on, negotiations are going on between the three parties as to what will happen next. I'm not in those negotiations. I'm not a councillor. I'm kept informed what's going on. But my prediction is that there will be a shared government of more than one party after these elections. That has benefits, to be honest. It brings more people into the political process. The real challenge, the last one that you raise, is getting young people to be involved in politics. William Pitt was Prime Minister when he was 24. Some of the best politicians have been those elected when they were very young. I was the youngest opposition MP, but I was already just over 30, so not that young. But we had very good people standing. You interviewed Arif, who was standing as a student in his first election. Sadly, he didn't get elected just for the area over the road here, but I hope he'll stand again. And we had lots of other young people standing. So our job is to excite and motivate young people because they're the electors of the future. And I hope we will persuade them that we've been as clear about the need to defend Gaza as the Greens ever have. We just probably haven't been as loud as they have. We've been as clear on safeguarding our planet as the Greens ever have. We may not have been as good at getting that message across. And we've been as clear that we need a fairer society where those businesses and people with huge wealth pay much more into the kitty and there's a much better distribution of income and of wealth and of jobs. So I'm quite positive. Liberalism is needed in the world, and the good signs are, until recently, where Liberals have been in government in Canada, which is the biggest place in the world where we've been in government, it looked as if we were going to lose the election. We changed the leader, and Mark Carney became the leader, and he got a big majority. And there are Liberals in government in other countries in Europe. So it's entirely possible that we will be able to be back in government before long. We got our best ever result last time, 72 MPs, more than for 100 years. So I hope we'll build on this. And obviously I have an ambition, it won't be me, but that we win back the seat that was taken from us in 2015. And we'll be selecting a candidate later this year to fight for that seat. Rachel Bentley, who was my colleague, is a councillor, deputy leader of our council group. She stood for us last time. It'll be up to the members to decide whether she's our candidate next time. It'd be great to have a female MP. Bermondsey's never had a female MP. The north of the borough's never had a female MP since 1931. So I think it's about time. And there are more women in Parliament. And that was one of the great things, one of the great changes in Parliament was that from the time I went to the time I left, there were many more women. I had the honour to be given a knighthood by the Queen, lovely late Queen. And she asked me, after she'd given me the knighthood, knighted me, what were the biggest changes I had seen in Parliament. And I said, Mum, many, many more women, which has made Parliament a much better place. Because I think you can't get good decisions for our society unless you have a balance of gender, unless you have a balance of age, unless you have a balance of background and faith and ethnicity and all those other things. You then get much better decisions. And Parliament is therefore, although it's struggling at the moment, a much better place. We do need to look at the voting system, and we do need to make sure that we keep Mr. Farage and his colleagues out of government, because they are, I'm afraid, institutionally racist by all I hear and see. They are dangerously nationalistic, and I don't see that they will produce a greater equality in our society. And it would be a sad day if we end up with a reform government, just as it would be a sad day if France ends up with a very right-wing nationalist president after next year's elections.
Yeah. So some staff and students feel that LSBU has gone back on some of the promises that it has made. And as Chancellor, how confident do you think that the university can rebuild trust with its students and create meaningful change going forward?
Well, as we speak now, as we're doing the interview, there is a consultation going on about some changes, and they're controversial, there's no doubt about that. There were some changes a few years ago. On that occasion, it was about deciding which courses should stay and which courses should go and so on. This time, it's not really about that. They're controversial in two ways. They're controversial in that they have a small number of posts that will be lost, teaching posts, but they're also controversial in the sense that they say that for the future, they want to have a different way of employing people, employing people who are doing only academic teaching and those who are doing research and academic teaching. Mm-hmm. And they want the second group to be employed by a subsidiary company of the university and not the university itself. Now, I know that the union, which represents about a quarter, 20% of the academic staff, are very unhappy with those proposals. I've told them they're very welcome to come and talk to me about that. They haven't yet taken up that offer. They did have the majority support of the board of the university. Some people will not be happy. There may be a few people who leave because of that. But I'm satisfied from what I've heard that on balance, they are, like other universities, they're for the purpose of giving us stability and growth in the future. And the really good news is, A, we're not in big financial difficulties like other universities are. Therefore, there's no threat to our existence. And some other London universities are really struggling. Secondly, we have this amazing and unique structure, which is called the South Bank University Group. So we have the university. We then have colleges, so further education colleges, based not far away, one just overlooking Clapham Common, one just out in Wandsworth. We have a sixth form and we have an academy. And the whole idea is that it's a group of educational institutions. Now, we don't only take people here who went to the academy or the sixth form or the college, but it's showing that education should be about moving between different levels of educational provision, and particularly from college to university. I used to work with something called the Open University, which is online, the biggest university in the country, the online university. Lots of people are frightened by the idea of university. They don't think they can afford it. They don't think they can manage it. They don't think they have the academic nous to see it through. But actually, there are ways of doing that, and we have to encourage people who may not be naturally academic to think that universities can be really good for them. And the last thing we do that's really good is we do a lot of degree apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are great things for people after school leaving because you get training and you get paid. And if you're doing a degree, you get a degree. So you come out of that period having been earning and not just paying in, having a qualification as an engineer or a nurse or an architect, and also having an academic qualification. So I think they'll be the model of the future for lots of people. And more people may do some of their university studies online and some in person. So the answer is, I'm hopeful we can rebuild trust. I know the Vice-Chancellor and his team will be very keen to do that. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions to get to the other side, but I hope and pray they're the right ones and that we'll be out of those difficulties by the end of this year at the latest.
Perfect. But you're coming towards the end of your term as Chancellor now, as we've spoken about before. On a lighter note, what are some of the highlights of your time?
Thank you. To start with the installation ceremony amongst lots of family and friends, which happened in the South Bank, unarguably the most special times are the times that are special for the students when we have graduation ceremonies. And I make a point of speaking to every single student who graduates. And that's about 4,000 every autumn. And I talk to them all over a period of days, not just saying the same thing, but trying to respect them as they are and encourage them and then meet their families and their friends and supporters. And then, as well as sort of slightly more boring things to do with winning arguments with the government, I think probably my individual big highlight was when I gave a degree to Abid Raza, who is an Afghan, and who I learnt about. He was at the end of his first year here. He went back to Afghanistan during COVID. He married his long-term girlfriend in Afghanistan that year. The Taliban came back into Kabul that summer. He'd been heard speaking English to somebody, so they were suspicious that he was not friendly. They arrested him and his family. He had to escape. He had to escape over land, disguised to get over the border out of Afghanistan. He had to leave his new wife behind. I was alerted to this when he was in Kabul by one of the staff here. Through WhatsApp, I was able to keep in touch with him all the way when he escaped, when he was on his journey to the border, at the border, when he ended up in hospital in Uzbekistan. And since then, we were able to persuade the authorities to give him asylum here. He was able to get his wife out safely to the UAE and eventually able to get a right for her to join him, which she has done. They now have a little boy. He graduated with a very good degree. He's now set up 2 of his own businesses. He's also working as an Uber driver. For me, the greatest joy was when he came across the stage and London South Bank University had been able to support him from the moment that he was arrested in Kabul by the Taliban and at risk of losing his life and his marriage and everything else. If we can do that, not just for Abid, who I'm still in touch with and I regard as a friend, then to me that's what universities are for. Not just for people from Afghanistan or other places, but to people from South London or North London or East London, West London. It's a place of opportunity. And I was inspired when I met people from a university in the States called Georgia State University, who do the same in Atlanta, as I want us to continue doing here. So the highlight for me is helping people make progress and fulfill their ambitions. And just a PS, one of the people who was an alumna of us is the new female Archbishop of Canterbury. She did her first and second degrees here in nursing. Wow. She became a nurse and the head of nursing in England. And Dame Sarah Mullally is now the first ever female Archbishop of Canterbury. Wow. So talk about breaking glass ceilings. You know, that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure there are no barriers, no walls. That doesn't mean everybody can fulfill the ambition they want. Doesn't mean that everybody wants to be a Liverpool football player, can be a Liverpool football player or won the Champions League, but there are always ways forward. And as long as we look after people and love them and care for them and give them the support, hopefully they will come through and South Bank will serve them well. So lots of very happy memories when at the end I hand over my gown and mortarboard and badge in November this year.
Wow, what a way to end. Thank you so much for your time, Simon. And I hope that we can meet again. Anything else?
Definitely. After you hand back your stuff, see what your thoughts are.
Well, can I say thank you to both of you? It's a real pleasure to do it with you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you for showing that absolutely there are really important ways young people in our community can influence what goes on. And thank you to the team and Living Bankside, and keep on doing this sort of thing, and all the best with your careers. And if there's ever any small way in which I can help, I hope I might be able to have the privilege of doing that.
Thank you. This has been another episode of Living Conversations. Thank you for watching. Let me say that again. This has been another episode of Living Conversations. Thank you for watching.